Let's just start with some common RF related issues, specifically wireless type issues. And you can see pictured to the left, there's actually, you have your wireless LAN controller, your access point. In this case, a guest is not able to associate with the SSID on the lightweight access point. So here's the basic idea. Here's the symptoms of the problem. The SSID is not visible when scanning. And as a result, the client's not associating and it's not receiving an IP address. So here are potential solutions for this particular issue. First, enable the SSID to be broadcast, or you could alternatively supply the SSID to the user. You also may need to activate the SSID and or the WLAN on the AP, if it's autonomous, or on the controller, if it's lightweight. It may also be a matter of not being able to enter the correct security key or credentials on the client device, in which case you would have to supply them. These are some multiple answers just to this particular problem. The next problem you'll run into, and I can almost guarantee you when you're actually using wireless, you're going to run into this at one point or another. You're not getting an IP address. For instance, way to be able to tell if this is the case is number one, the network's unreachable. It says network access, there's no network access or internet access or both. And your client is getting an IP address in the 169.254.0016 range, which is sometimes called the Microsoft Windows auto configuration address. It basically means that since it can't get an address, it basically makes one up on its own in that range. And it's supposed to be a feature that helps, but most of the time it's just annoying. The solution to solving this particular problem, first, you may have to re-enable your DHCP server if for some reason it's offline or not functioning. Another thing that you can do from the client perspective is issue the commands ipconfig release and ipconfig renew from a Windows command prompt. Frequently, whenever I've had this issue, I've done a release renew, and at least half the time it's solved the problem. Sometimes it's required more than once, but basically the DHCP is not being supplied. You might need to find a stronger signal to an access point because this can happen when your signal isn't particularly strong, or you might have to eliminate sources of interference that are keeping the client from being able to get a decent connection. So more to the point on what we're talking about as the topic of this particular lesson are going to be more switch related and network related issues. So let's look at a couple switch related issues. It could be misconfigured port settings. See picture to the left? You have an access port to your wireless LAN controller rather than a trunk. So the symptoms are the clients are unable to send traffic. In other words, they're able to associate, they're getting an IP address, all that's working, especially for an autonomous access point. It could also be that the communication with the network and the wireless LAN controller is impaired or absent. If on a lightweight access point, if this is the case, you're not going to get anything done. And here's the solution. You start with show interfaces switch port to confirm and to change the port settings. For autonomous access points, if you have a single SSID and a single VLAN, you can use an access port. If you're using a lightweight AP, you're always going to be using an access port. It may seem counterintuitive, but the way that the controller actually creates the separate SSIDs and VLANs is through a series of tunnels. It doesn't have to involve anything other than an access port. Now, on an autonomous AP, if you want multiple VLANs, you have to configure it as an 802.1q trunk. Not ISL, but 802.1q. And for the controller must be configured using a trunk connection. You may get a partial connection with an access link, but ultimately that's where your problems lie. So always make sure you have the right connection between your wireless LAN controller and your access point. Another thing that could be a problem is missing or corrupted VLAN settings. And this is very similar from a symptom standpoint. Your clients can't send traffic and communication with the network is either impaired or it's absent. The easiest way to check this, you can see that in the diagram, it shows that VLAN 111 is basically not configured. Issue the show VLAN command and verify the VLAN ID of the VLANs configured on the switch. And there may be a variety of reasons where you have to do this with autonomous access points, but on the lightweight, navigate to the wireless LAN tab on the wireless LAN controller and make sure the interfaces, you can create interfaces to associate SSIDs with VLANs, and verify the interfaces and VLAN settings match if they don't change them. I've run into this before myself. Another area it has to do with network related issues. Inter-VLAN routing is not functioning. And if you recall, there are two ways to have inter-VLAN routing work. If you have a layer 2 only switch, you'll have to use an external router, and it's called router on a stick. You have to have a series of sub-interfaces created on the LAN interface of the router, along with the correct VLAN encapsulations and VLAN IDs, or you have a layer 3 switch with an internal route processor. But typically, the symptoms are you're not going to be able to get a valid IP address, and communication with the network is not possible outside the wireless LAN. In other words, you can reach the access point, you can reach other clients, but you can't get anywhere else. And the easy solution is to do the show IP interface brief command on the layer 3 switch and determine if SVIs exist for the VLANs. Remember, that's the requirement. You have to have a VLAN interface configured on the switch, which is the switch virtual interface or layer 3 interface representing that VLAN on the switch, in order for there to be inter-VLAN routing. Or you use the show running config command on a router to verify if the sub interfaces are configured, if the VLAN IDs are correct, and the encapsulation is correct.